Welcome to Recap King. In this video, we will explain Sunflower. This movie tells the story of a dreaded ex-con who leaves his past behind and tries to lead a better life with his new family. Amid this phase, he faces his real test in the form of a troublesome situation that threatens to push him back into his old ways. Will he be able to start a new life, or will he be trapped in a dark past? Let's find out in Sunflower. Sunflower begins by showing a man named Tae-sig, who has just been released after 10 years in prison. Tae-sig is on his way to his hometown, where he writes down some things he will do after he gets out of prison in a notebook, and crosses them out when he does. Tae-sig then heads to a diner called Sunflower and intends to meet the woman who owns the shop, who is none other than his adoptive mother. However, the woman isn't there and will not be back until evening, so Hee-ju, the diner owner's daughter, asks him to go to the public bath first and come back later. After that, Tae-sig goes to a public bathhouse and again crosses out the list of activities he's about to do that are listed in his book. Arriving there, Tae-sig seems confused about unlocking the locker to store his belongings, thus upsetting a guard because he thinks Tae-sig is deliberately playing with the locker key. Because of Tae-sig's geeky appearance, the guard man bullies him. However, when Tae-sig takes off his clothes, the man sees the tattoos all over his body, and suddenly his guts shrink because he thinks Tae-sig is a gangster. Meanwhile, in another place, several gangsters were seen bullying a girl on the side of the road. The gangsters are the men of Changmu and Yonggi, the local gangsters who rule the city. Two police officers were seen patrolling not far from the road, but they ignored the bullying and stayed in their car. Changmu, who was at a nightclub, was approached by Tae-sig, who intended to greet his old friend. Changmu seems to have a lot of respect for Tae-sig, which shows that Tae-sig isn't a random person because gangster leaders like Changmu are so disdainful of him. It turns out that Tae-sig used to be a former gangster who was quite respected in the city. Not only Changmu, but Yonggi also looks very reluctant when Tae-sig comes to visit him. Although Yonggi shows goodwill when Tae-sig meets him, he then orders his men to monitor Tae-sig movements while in town. After visiting some of his old friends, Tae-sig finally returns to the Sunflower restaurant and meets the woman who owns the tavern, who welcomes him with joy. His adoptive mother is so happy to see him finally released from prison after so long. Even though Tae-sig is her adopted son, the woman seems to really love him like her own biological child. Tae-sig then apologizes to his mother for what he did in the past, and the mother says that she has forgiven him for a long time. Even though her mother accepts Tae-sig's presence in their house and seems to love him very much, Hee-ju doesn't necessarily accept Tae-sig's presence. She even blatantly expresses her dislike for Tae-sig, and thinks of him as a weak man because of his very geeky appearance. That night, Tae-sig is going to sleep, determined that he won't cry anymore, won't drink alcohol again, and won't fight anymore to become a better person and fulfill his promise to his mother. The next day, Jo Pon-soo, a man who will run for government office in the upcoming general election, is seen campaigning in the market and making grapevine promises to traders so that they vote for him in the election. Pon-soo is actually a mafia intent on taking over the city. On the other hand, Tae-sig is seen at the police station signing a parole report stating that he will be sent back to prison if he has committed another crime. One of the police officers, Min-suk, approaches Tae-sig and advises him to leave the city because the residents don't like his presence, who caused chaos a few years ago. However, Tae-sig tries to convince Min-suk that he has changed now and will become a better person. Even Tae-sig intends to remove all the tattoos on his body to emphasize his determination to really want to change to become a better person. However, Tae-sig's intention had to be hampered because he had to spend a lot of money to remove all the tattoos on his body. After that, Tae-sig's adoptive mother appears to visit Pon-soo and expresses her rejection of Pon-soo's plan to buy her restaurant to build an elite area for the benefit of his class. She then threatens Pon-soo that she will strike back at him if his thugs continue to make a fuss at her Sunflower restaurant. The next day, Tae-sig finally lands a job as a mechanic at an auto repair shop. One day, Min-suk and his partner, who were on patrol, saw Tae-sig, who seemed so severe and diligent in doing his job. Min-suk then tells his partner about Tae-sig's past, who was a delinquent, even when he was at school, where he was one of the victims of Tae-sig's bullying. Min-suk also said that Changmu and Yonggi used to be nothing compared to Tae-sig. Several years ago, the gangsters in the city were led by a man named Cho Do-pil, where Changmu and Yonggi used to be his men. However, because Tae-sig is always causing trouble, Do-pil finally intervenes and orders his men to kill him. Unexpectedly, Tae-sig turns out to be too tough to fight, where he can easily incapacitate Do-pil's men, and even kill Do-pil, so Tae-sig must be in prison for the murder. After the incident, Changmu and Yonggi took over the leadership of the gangsters and joined Pon-soo. Min Suk and his partner then visit the workshop where Tae-sig works and meet his employer. Min Suk then reveals Tae-sig's identity to his superiors, but Tae-sig's employer doesn't seem to care about Tae-sig's past as a recidivist because he has worked well and diligently so far. The next day, Tae-sig visits Hee-ju's course, intending to take an English course. One of the teachers who teach at the course apparently recognizes Tae-sig because they had attended the same school. The woman then asks how Tae-sig is and the two are seen chatting casually. On his way home, Tae-sig is attacked by a thug named Seong-jin, who has a crush on Hee-ju and gets jealous of his closeness with the girl he loves. Seong-jin then takes Tae-sig to an empty warehouse and bumps into him there. Since Tae-sig has determined not to fight anymore, he doesn't fight back when Seong-jin and his men beat him up. However, Seong-jin and his minions are very surprised to see Tae-sig's tattoos when his clothes are accidentally torn off. After the incident, Hee-ju's attitude softened a little. Even she also treated Tae-sig's wound. Elsewhere, Pon-soo is seen celebrating his victory for winning the most votes in the general election. Now that he's been sworn in as a government official, Pon-soo intends to hand over the leadership of running the biggest nightclub in town to his trusted henchmen. Chong-moo and Young-gi are enthusiastic about the plan and compete to gain the mafia boss's trust. But before that, Pon-soo makes a condition: whoever gets rid of the Sunflower restaurant will run his elite nightclub. Hearing this, Chong-moo immediately orders his men to tear up the Sunflower restaurant so that the owner is willing to sell the land and the restaurant building to Pon-soo. However, Chong-moo runs into Tae-sig there, so he immediately orders his men to hurry away from there. Chong-moo then apologizes to Tae-sig because he didn't know he was there. After that, Chong-moo goes straight to Young-gi and scolds him for not telling him about Tae-sig now living at the Sunflower restaurant. Meanwhile, Tae-sig, who gets his first salary after a month working at a car repair shop, then presents a pair of shoes for his mother and a camera for Hee-ju. It was revealed that the small notebook that Tae-sig always carried was actually a gift from his mother when the woman visited him in prison a few years ago. Since then, Tae-sig has always written in the notebook about all the activities he did in prison and also what activities he wants to do after he gets out of prison. Hee-ju accidentally finds the notebook and reads it. She then writes that they are going on a picnic as one of Tae-sig's things to do after being released from prison. Tae-sig, Hee-ju and his mother go on a picnic and take pictures like a happy little family. One night, Tae-sig runs into his old friend, Byung-jin, who is none other than Pon-soo's driver. Byung-jin says that Pon-soo plans to build a big mall in the area, but his plans are thwarted by Tae-sig's adoptive mother's Sunflower restaurant, where she is reluctant to sell her land to Pon-soo. Byung-jin then asks Tae-sig to increase his vigilance since Pon-soo is a dangerous man. On the other hand, unbeknownst to them both, Chong-moo's men see Tae-sig and Byung-jin having a serious conversation and report it to Chong-moo. Hearing this, Chong-moo and Young-gi think that Byung-jin is trying to recruit Tae-sig on Pon-soo's orders. They then hatch a plan to destroy Sunflower's restaurant and Tae-sig. The next day, Chong-moo and his men ransacked Sunflower's restaurant and threatened Tae-sig's mother into selling her restaurant to Pon-soo. Hee-ju, who just got home from school, then hits Chong-moo with the camera Tae-sig gave her, then goes to Tae-sig and reports the incident. By the time Tae-sig and Hee-ju arrive at the Sunflower restaurant, Chong-moo and his crew have already left, leaving their mother looking overwhelmed with cleaning up the dilapidated restaurant. After helping his mother clean up the mess in the restaurant, Tae-sig then goes to Chong-moo and asks that he be reunited with Pon-soo. After meeting with Pon-soo, Tae-sig begs him not to bother his adoptive mother's Sunflower restaurant anymore. Knowing that Tae-sig used to be a gangster, Pon-soo offers him a job. But Tae-sig refuses Pon-soo's offer politely, saying that he's quite satisfied with his current job. Belittled that no one had ever dared refuse his offer before, Pon-soo then hatched a plan to frame Tae-sig for him to be sent back to prison. Pon-soo then orders his men to attack the car repair shop where Tae-sig works to get him into a riot and will report the matter to the police. The next day, the thugs storm the auto repair shop where Tae-sig works and beat him up. They also did not hesitate to beat Tae-sig's employer. On the other hand, Pon-soo then reports to the police about Tae-sig being involved in a riot. However, Tae-sig manages to restrain himself and doesn't launch a counterattack, so the police don't arrest him and Pon-soo's plan fails miserably. One night, Seong-jin visits the Sunflower restaurant and tells Hee-ju that Tae-sig is the one who killed his older brother, Do-pil, years ago. Hearing this, Hee-ju is very surprised and angry at Tae-sig. She then demanded an explanation from her mother why she adopted the person who had killed her own biological son. Hee-ju's mother says that Tae-sig apologized while kneeling and crying after killing Do-pil. Because of this, she thinks that Tae-sig is not a bad person and decides to forgive him, then adopts him as her own son. Hearing his mother's words, Hee-ju finally understands. Tae-sig then apologizes to Hee-ju for killing Do-pil and says he will get out from their house. But Hee-ju asks Tae-sig to stay with them. Hee-ju says that she has forgiven his actions and instead wants to thank him for killing her brother who was always rude and beat his mother all his life. The next day, Tae-sig's adoptive mother comes to Pon-soo and threatens to expose his crime of ordering Do-pil to kill Tae-sig years ago, for which she has concrete evidence that could lead Pon-soo to prison. Byung-jin, who knows the conversation, then alerts Tae-sig and asks him to stay alert because Pon-soo will do anything to get what he wants, including getting rid of people who get in his way. Pon-soo kicks off his action by ordering his men to attack Hee-ju, who was crossing the street. She was hit with a hard object on the head, so she had to be hospitalized for intensive treatment. Because her daughter was attacked, Tae-sig's adoptive mother decides to sell Sunflower Restaurant to Pon-soo for the safety of her entire family. After that, Tae-sig goes to Pon-soo and says that his adoptive mother has agreed to sell Sunflower Restaurant and they will all move from there. Unexpectedly, Pon-soo requests that Tae-sig's right hand be paralyzed so that he won't be able to fight anymore. Byung-jin was the one who executed by cutting the vein in Tae-sig's right hand. But it turns out that Byung-jin only injured Tae-sig's right hand with a non-fatal cut, so he can still use his right hand as usual. Tae-sig then goes to Hee-ju and says he will protect her and her mother forever. Even though Sunflower's restaurant is now his, Pon-soo still seems to want to get rid of Tae-sig's adoptive mother. He then orders Young-gi to kill her and retrieves evidence explaining his involvement in Tae-sig's assassination attempt several years ago. Young-gi jumps into action, killing Tae-sig's adoptive mother and disguising her death as suicide. Tae-sig then feels very devastated by the death of his mother who he loves so much. He initially thought that his mother died by suicide, but apparently he found a clue, namely Young-gi's earrings in his mother's room, so he finally realized that Young-gi had killed his mother on Pon-soo's orders. Knowing this fact, Tae-sig can no longer keep his promise. He cried while drinking alcohol until he was drunk because he could not bear the sadness over the death of his mother who he loved so much. On the other hand, Pon-soo and the rest of his crew celebrate their success in getting the Sunflower Restaurant and realizing plans to build a mall and an elite area. But then, they are startled by the sound of someone crying, which is none other than Tae-sig. The man said that he had broken his promise to his mother after her death, by which time he would now slaughter everyone in the place. Tae-sig then asks Byung-jin to get out of there unless he wants to die at his hands. Even though he's alone, Tae-sig manages to kill all of Pon-soo's men, including Chong-moo and Young-gi, until he manages to kill Pon-soo and set his nightclub on fire. In a state of severe injury and in a blazing fire, Tae-sig sits, remembering the good memories he had with his mother and Hee-ju. Before long, Tae-sig finally dies in the blazing fire. The film ends by showing Hee-ju, who has recovered from her injuries and is now the smartest student in the mathematics department like her dream. Hee-ju is seen reminiscing about the good times with her mother and Tae-sig. The moral of this film is never to give up and hesitate to repent after making a mistake. Because every action done wholeheartedly, including repenting, will certainly bring happiness to oneself and others. Like Tae-sig, who is determined to repent and become better after killing someone else. He gets opportunities from the people around him because he really wants to change his life for the better. And don't forget, thank the people who have allowed us to be better, because while everyone hates us for our bad deeds in the past, they still see the good in us.